Hey guys, so I said that I would be back with a spoiler review for The Last Jedi. I went this Tuesday with two of my coworkers, and now I'm ready to get into spoilers. No holding back, because during my spoiler-free review that came out last week, I really struggled not to say anything or reveal anything in the slightest. And you actually have no idea how much editing and redoing that I had to do in the first video in order to make it totally spoiler-free. And, god damn it, it was really hard. I ended up editing that video for like 2 hours straight because I was just non-stop talking and I just kept messing up and everything. And I tell you, when it's just yourself editing, when you do stuff like this on a regular basis, it gets really difficult, really tedious. Anyway, I'm sitting like this in my normal setup for last week in cinema because I knew that during this video, to make it a bit shorter, especially with editing, I wanted to actually have show notes in front of me because I knew that I was gonna forget things, and even now I think that I'm gonna forget things. But I basically condensed everything into one little thing, and I wanted to make sure that I got everything. And for those of you who have not already seen my non-spoiler review, or you know what, if you already have, you already know that I immensely loved The Last Jedi. I gave it a very high review, and I recognize that there are weak portions, things that don't really work with a lot of people, including the Canto Bight stuff, and a lot of Finn and Rose's little story arc, but like I said, I really understand them. But for me, they all worked. They really did, and it was a different experience than Rogue One because when I watched Rogue One the first time, I thought it was amazing, and then each time I went to see it, it got progressively worse, and now I just think it's not really that good a Star Wars film, let alone a film. I just think that, like, the first two acts are eh, and then the third act is, like, near perfect. Except for that whole monologue where Jin starts to, you know, tell all the plans to the villain, which is kind of switched, which was odd. But this time, watching The Last Jedi again, I actually found a couple of reasons to love it a bit more. And so that's a good sign. Anyway, guys, if you haven't seen Last Jedi yet, just go out and see it before you watch this video, or any other spoiler videos on the interwebs of YouTubes. Because, I'm gonna go as far in depth as I possibly can with all of this. And I really don't want to ruin this for anybody who hasn't seen the actual movie, because it's better to see than be told what happens. After I give the signal, if you're still here, then you risk learning about things that would have been better if you had seen it in the theaters. Okay, understood? Good, alright, final warning, and go. So first I want to start off with the bigger twists and reveals, and let me think. There's a couple of them. There's like 2 or 3. I believe there's 3. Okay, I'm going to start off with the biggest one in my opinion, which has to do with the throne room on Snoke's ship. Look, I don't think that many of us thought that Kylo Ren was going to kill Rey. I mean, that was weird. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense for the middle film of the trilogy to be where the main protagonist, especially the main Jedi protagonist, dies. I was merely believing that Kylo Ren would basically say no and battle against the Praetorian Guards and maybe Snoke. However, I was not expecting 2 things. I wasn't expecting Ren to use the Skywalker family lightsaber to impale Snoke into cutting himself, which, by the way, that scene was immeasurably satisfying. Sure, we didn't get enough, or really any insight into who Snoke was in this film, but that really didn't bother me. I mean, we didn't know anything about Palpatine during Return of the Jedi. We didn't learn anything until like a decade later when they came out with the prequel, or when they started coming out with the prequels, which I don't think was very smart. I liked the little bit of, you know, where we didn't know anything about the villain. There was still that mystery about him. But yeah, I actually, the other thing, I thought that it would be really risky for Rian Johnson, the director, to take this mysterious character that pretty much every Star Wars fan had a theory about, or made a theory up for the past 2 years, and decided to use him as a placeholder, which actually, this was another thing that I thought was going to happen. I thought that tied to Rey and Kylo Ren fighting against the Praetorian Guards and maybe Snoke, I didn't think that Kylo was going to turn to the light. I did not think that at all. If anything, I thought that if they escaped, then Kylo Ren was going to go rogue. I knew that he was going to stay dark, but I didn't think that he was going to be with the First Order anymore. But sure enough, Snoke was mainly a placeholder, an obstacle that Ren had to overcome in order to seize power and become Supreme Leader Ren. Showing that he truly cannot be redeemed. And yeah, as I said, I thought that he was going to go rogue, but now we have Supreme Leader Ren, who is the true villain of this trilogy. Nobody lurking in the shadows anymore, just the First Order left and their new leader. Let me see. Oh, the second twist was the reveal of who Rey's parents were. And one thing that I noticed online was that a lot of people are saying that Kylo was lying to her when he said that they were a bunch of drunks who sold her for drinking money, basically. But here's the thing. He only said that after he convinced her to tell herself the truth. And you could tell that there was no manipulation, because when there was manipulation in The Force Awakens, you could kind of hear that rumbling in the background. And they even kind of played it when they had that little Force connection where he tried to convince her to tell him where Luke Skywalker was. But it didn't work. You still heard that rumble, but it didn't work, obviously. And he was just standing there saying, you know what it is, just say it. And then she basically says, my parents come from nowhere. I am nothing. She admitted to herself, she spoke the words, that's it. There's no lying. She is actually from nowhere. She is not significant. As she says, as he says to her, she's, to the overall story, you're no one. Just not to me. You're actually someone to me. And that was mainly because he saw her as like a potential either partner or apprentice. I really don't know what he was looking for in that. But yeah, to this point, a person does not always have to come from some grand heritage to do great things. And there's always those idiots who say, it wouldn't make any sense if, let's say, she wasn't a Kenobi or Skywalker, because then why would she be able to use the Force? Seriously? The Jedi never allowed their members to become attached to anyone. That meant that they could not have any children either. And the only reason that there were Force users was because the Force would always create this Force connection inside of certain children that were born. And whenever it was found out, the Jedi Order would go to that planet and just take the children, with the parents' permission, of course, that's obvious, and they would take them to train. It was as simple as that. They took them from an early age so that they wouldn't become too attached to their parents. And actually, that attachment thing is not exactly true. There was one exception, and it was Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, but that was mainly because in his species, males were very rare, so he was allowed to take a few wives because it was important for the survival of his species that he actually stay married. I don't know how it worked with all, like, attachments and stuff, and everything, getting emotions, but I guess it worked because he was in the Jedi Order for so long, or at least until Order 66 when he was killed on, was it Christoph? No, I'm trying to remember the planet's name in Revenge of the Sith. I used to know this very well. But anyway, I'm getting way off track now. I will say that the only Rey theory that I actually felt that there was any semblance of a possibility was for the descendant of Obi-Wan Kenobi, because there's still that time period between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope where we have no idea what the hell Obi-Wan was doing. Except for that fight with Darth Maul, which, spoilers if you haven't seen Star Wars Rebels, Maul doesn't survive, obviously, because, Obi-Wan is one of, if not the greatest swordsman in the Jedi Order to ever live. And, anyway, but in the end, despite the fact that I would have been okay with Rey being a Kenobi by heritage, I'm glad that Rey comes from no one particular. I mean, while that doesn't answer why Rey is so powerful, we do actually get an answer to that, but I'll talk about it a little bit later. Oh, and for the third and final big twist was, of course, something that ties into my next talking point, and that's the new things that Last Jedi did when it comes to all that can be accomplished with the Force. And that first thing, which is also the third big plot twist, was the Force projection of Luke Skywalker. You know what I originally wanted from Luke Skywalker? I wanted the equivalent of the Vader scene from Rogue One, and I think the majority of us wanted it. We wanted to see Luke ignite his green lightsaber and just tear up a bunch of random First Order stormtroopers, or just like run at a bunch of, or I don't know how to describe it, but like fight a bunch of Praetorian Guards or Knights of Ren and just decimate the fuckers. But, you know, however, we didn't get that. And you know what? What happened is actually really good evidence that we should not go into a film with certain expectations, because we will most likely get disappointed with what we see. I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't. I loved that scene. I think I loved it even more than what would have happened if they had done the scene that a lot of us wanted, which was that Vader equivalent moment. And I think that's why I love it, because they decided, you know what, we are gonna take a risk with this, and we'll see if it paid off. And I think, to me, it paid off, and I think to most everybody it paid off, because I haven't really heard anything negative about it, except like maybe one or two very big paragraphs where it's just a bunch of people bitching about it. But I don't know. If you hated it, that's fine. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion. It's just that I'm talking about. Okay, anytime when I'm talking about assholes, whenever I mention assholes who have a differing opinion, I'm mainly referring to those who go online, talk about it, and then when anybody says that they have a differing opinion, they fucking attack them. I fucking hate those people. Listen, again, if you have a different opinion from what I'm saying or anybody else, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. That's the great thing about being a Star Wars fan, is that we all come from different backgrounds, and we all think different things about our franchise, our saga, and we get to just, you know, talk about it as normal people, just debate and have a bit of fun with it. But I do not tolerate anybody who fucking shits on others for having a differing opinion and saying that they're wrong and that they're idiots for thinking wrong, or for thinking the way that they do. I fucking hate that. But anyway, back to the scene. I loved that Luke Skywalker came out, and by the way, that scene right before where he's talking to Leia, I swear I was trembling, especially on the second time, because the first time I was so overwhelmed by the fact that Leia and Luke were in the same room and that they were talking that I didn't really listen to the words. But when he said no one is really gone forever, I was trembling. I was trying my hardest not to cry, because I felt like that was the filmmakers trying to mention something about, or I know that she was alive during then, so it doesn't really matter, but it was as though the film was talking to me, saying, you know, like, Carrie Fisher will always be with us. Okay, my eyes are getting heavy because of, you know, tears. Okay. But I loved that scene afterwards where Luke would walk out into the, or onto the rest of the planet, and Kylo Ren just orders all the walkers to fire on him, which was overkill, but I still loved it. And after the dust clears, you just see him walk off and then casually brush his shoulder off, as if to give the biggest middle finger to Kylo Ren. And I love that small part because, well, okay, at work, I get a chance to interact with a lot of people. I socialize every once in a while whenever there's not, like, a shit ton of people coming, or, you know, needing assistance. And, some people would tell me that they just saw The Last Jedi, and regardless of whether or not they asked me if I had seen it or not, I would just look at them and go, and every single time, most of them would laugh just with excitement over that, because that was one of their favorite, just funny moments in the entire movie. And one risky thing that didn't happen was the urge to have Luke's lightsaber collide with Kylo's. Though I don't know if it would have actually worked, since he wasn't corporeal, and plus that lightsaber was the lightsaber that was destroyed in the kind of force duel between Kylo and Rey, so that lightsaber couldn't be used anyway. I initially thought in the first viewing that it was another kind of lightsaber that just looked similar, but seeing it the second time, that was obviously the Skywalker family lightsaber. Why it wasn't green, I don't think I will ever know. I just hope that they do answer that, because that was kind of odd. But anyway, what they did was, yeah, it just looked really cool. It wasn't even him fighting. It was just him doing, like, really cool-ass dodges. And one thing that I loved about Star Wars was anything having to do with lightsabers. The cinematography made the Jedi, or any Force user, or anybody with a lightsaber, feel like a fucking samurai. And oh my god, I absolutely loved that. It was so beautiful. Actually, I did just think of something. And I actually did forget this in the notes. I was actually talking to the guys that I was watching the film with the other night. I actually said, one thing that I noticed was there were two shots where the camera would focus on Luke and Kylo's feet during their little battle. First they showed Kylo, and when he dragged his foot across the ground, it exposed the red soil over the top layer of salt. But when Luke did it, nothing. No sand. And that is an amazing and clever nod to the fact that he is not there. And of course, the first time that I watched it, I wasn't exactly sure what happened when Ren slashed at Luke with his crossguard, but when they show that he's still there, standing, many thoughts rushed to my head. Is Luke somehow so powerful that a lightsaber can't hurt him? Is he some new form of Force Ghost that's more corporeal than, say, Yoda's Force Ghost was? Which, by the way, we will talk about that later. But then we are shown that Luke is still in Ahch-To, sending a projection of himself light years away. You know, like the astral projections from Doctor Strange. He's just sending a projection of himself light years away in order to distract the First Order to let the remnants of the Resistance escape. Because I think at the end of the day, there were only, like, I think at the most 20 people left, including Leia, Finn, Rey, Poe, Chewie, you know, all those people. But there really wasn't that much left from the Resistance. And when he disappears and goes back to Jakku, or not Jakku, sorry, Ahch-To, I actually had a feeling that he had used up way too much energy to keep on living, and I expected him to die, but I was actually getting ready to scream at the screen because I thought that they were going to go really stupid about it. But then something happened. We got that shot of a sweaty Luke staring at the sky in the distance, and the sun is setting, and all you can see is one sun. But then they start putting in that that John Williams Binary Sunset theme, which many consider the Luke Skywalker theme. It starts playing, and soon the clouds kind of part a bit to show that there's two suns, and Luke is like off on the right, and he's just watching, and it really invokes that feel of when Luke looked towards the twin suns on Tatooine during A New Hope, and I saw the look on Luke's face. He had finally accepted everything that had happened up to that point, and he had finally found peace, and you could just see it in his face, and at that point, I was ready to accept his death. That was an amazing way to go out, especially for him. If it wasn't going to be in the heat of battle that he died, this was a very appropriate death. Oh my god, I loved it. It was so moving. And it made everything that I saw worth it, because that initial scene where Luke has his father's lightsaber and just tosses it behind his back, which, by the way, was hilarious. The first showtime, or the first thing that the first time that we saw it, there were quite a few laughs, mainly because nobody had expected that and they didn't know what to do. But the second time, nobody laughed. I didn't know if that was because it was just a tough crowd, or if pretty much everybody in the theater had already seen it and they just felt like seeing it again. I don't know. But, I just love that one because it was like he just didn't give a fuck about anything. Because, I mean, he did say that he's there to die. And that one was a great scene because it was like it was Johnson's way of saying, this is not going to go the way you think, like Luke says to Rey later in the film, and as we saw in the trailers. It is very likely that we will see Luke come back as a Force Ghost in Episode 9. So no reason to be fully sad that he's gone. The only time we can be sad is when Mark Hamill dies, which will hopefully not be for another few decades, because that man is an American treasure. And actually, going back on the original subject, speaking of things accomplished through the Force never done before in a film, I can think of actually 3 things. First was the one that many people bitched and griped about online, and it was the Leia space scene. You know the one I'm talking about, the one where she uses the Force to preserve her life in order to get back to the ship. First off, and that's not all of it, but I'll get to the rest of it in a second. First off, it is very likely that she can survive, especially if she is Force sensitive. In the expanded universe, there was one Force ability that helped the user control their breath, and they mainly used it when they were underwater or if they were in a place filled with toxins. I'm assuming that this ability that Leia did is basically the same thing. And also, we see Leia floating through the ship's debris like she's Mary fucking Poppins. And that's the main part that people hate, because she looks like either Mary Poppins or a witch, the way that she's flying, even though nobody should complain because Jedis and Force sensitives are basically space wizards. But, you know, whatever. If you actually believe that that's stupid, like I said, that's your opinion. I'm not going to bash you on that, really. Although, knowing me, I will get a little heated and I will bash you. I won't mean it, and I will feel sorry afterwards, but like I said, that's because I'm really impulsive when I'm talking. I don't really control what I say, and I'm very blunt, and I speak my mind, and I never shut up, just like I'm doing right now. Okay, I'm gonna go back. But yeah, they do it because they don't believe that anybody using the Force can fly. Okay, look at it this way. I actually don't think she was flying. The Jedi have used the Force many times to make objects come towards them. You know, a standard Force pull. There's nothing that doesn't suggest that she didn't focus on a single object in question, or even the ship itself, and then she used that pull to pull herself towards the ship. You know, using the inertia of the Force, little f, not big F Force, of her propelling through space. And I actually really like that. And plus, it did look really cool. I've always wanted to see the Jedi or any Force sensitives showcased as space wizards, and I think this is the first one where it actually did feel like space wizards. Let me see. Oh, the second Force edition was that Force Skype call between Kylo and Rey, where he says that if the connection was made by Rey, which he obviously didn't do it, but if she had actually made it, it would have killed her. And I just loved it. It was really cool. It was a showcase to show later just how powerful Snoke was. You know, if he could actually create the connection. Even though we already saw a little bit of an inkling of how powerful he was in the first part of the movie, when he just appears as a hologram and he starts fucking manipulating General Hux and kind of like mildly torturing him. Even though I have no idea how far away he was from that. And actually, one thing that I thought was funny, I actually thought the shirtless Kylo Ren joke was funny, but I also liked it because it actually served a purpose to the plot too. Because the first time that they talked, I wondered how much Kylo and Rey could actually see of each other. How much could they actually see? And he even asked it a bit earlier. Could they see each other's faces? What could they see exactly? And then Rey's comment on how Ren should just put on a towel or something showcased that she could actually fully see him in their visions, if you could call them visions. I don't know if they could still see the room around them, but they could at least see their full bodies, which was actually a cool reveal. Because in Empire they did play with it a little bit, but it was very minuscule, and it wasn't that they could see each other. It was more of they could like mildly talk to each other. And actually, speaking of that, the way that was edited was pretty good. And actually, thinking back to that as well as the Luke and Vader stuff at the end of Empire, they had that exact same transition when Kylo Ren was flying in his little fighter. That's actually kind of stupid of me to say. But when he feels his mother's presence and then it just flickers back and forth, I loved how that pretty much invoked everything about the editing from Empire Strikes Back when Vader and Luke are talking to each other, where Vader says it's not too late, you can still join me, you know, after he cut off his hand. Okay, and the third thing was that we have found out that Force Ghosts have way more power than we initially thought, because when Luke goes to destroy the Jedi Temple, we are surprised by a visit from Ghost Yoda, who, by the way, great choice to make him a puppet. I was really scared that they were going to make him CGI, and I really didn't want that, but they made him a puppet. It made me so happy. He looked amazing. He just looked absolutely fantastic. And also, I'll get to the next thing in a second, but we see him manipulate the weather in order to send a lightning bolt into the temple, burning it. And of course, in the original trilogy fashion, after that happens, Yoda just starts laughing and stomping his feet in excitement, and it really reminded me of when Yoda, the way that Yoda acted in Empire Strikes Back, when he's rummaging through Luke's shit and he steals the little flashlight and he goes, my throat's a little scratchy right now, so I can't exactly do the right laugh. And if I tried, I would actually lose my voice, and then I would have to either start the video over, or I would have to stop for the rest of the day. But I really don't want to, because that's really a hassle. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, I did also love how Luke tried to go back in to get the books, even though we already know that Rey has them. In case you missed that at the end of the movie, she actually stole the books from the temple. So Yoda already knew that they were gone, and he says those two lines, how, I think the second line is the one that I remember the most, but he says, what was in those books isn't anything that the girl Rey does not already possess. But Luke's complaining about the journals being in there. It's like, those are the sacred Jedi texts, and he's like, oh, read them, have you? And he's like, well, and then Yoda says probably my favorite line in the entire film, page turners, they are not. Oh my god, he's still so funny. I'm so glad that Frank Oz came back to voice him. Oh, that made me so happy. Oh, and the final thing that had to do with the Force was why Rey was so powerful in the Force, and hopefully answer the it would hopefully be the answer to quell all those dumbasses on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever that say that Rey is a Mary Sue. She is not a fucking Mary Sue. Okay, that is one of the only opinions that has to do with Star Wars that I will not tolerate, because they show every reason in The Force Awakens. They show many reasons that Rey is not a Mary Sue. You know who was a Mary Sue? Prequel Anakin. That was a Mary Sue. That was a true Mary Sue. But anyway, it was explained by, it was explained why she was so powerful in the Force by Snoke, after he said the line from the trailer, darkness rises and the light to meet it. That was basically him explaining, and he actually did elaborate a bit more, that he knew that once Kylo became more and more powerful in the Force, that logically his equal in the light would become just as powerful due to the intervention, not interprevention. I don't know why I was saying that. But the intervention by the Force itself, making sure that there is a true balance of light and dark. And I think that's brilliant, because I always thought that it was odd that the Jedi Order originally thought that to bring balance to the Force, they had to kill off any last remaining Sith, as well as dark side users. Because, you know, true balance isn't about that. It's actually about, you know, without light there will always be darkness. And you can't have light without the darkness. Like, there has to be a balance. And then came the rise of Vader, which I do believe, since he was a Force birth, that the Force actually created him to become part of the dark side. And then that would actually bring about Luke, who actually did bring more balance to the Force. Because once Vader came up and he destroyed the entire Jedi, there were really, other than remnants of the Jedi, maybe a couple spread out throughout the universe that have been confirmed, but I'm not sure, but I do believe Obi-Wan was the last Jedi from the Jedi Order, not including Yoda. There was actually a true balance between the light and the dark. There was Luke and Leia, and then Vader and Palpatine. That was a true balance. And then Luke defeated both of them and brought his father back to the light. Now there's two lightsiders, and obviously over the years the Force did bring it in a way that it would bring balance, and of course that obviously and again, this is just my opinion, but to me it seems pretty structurally sound for a theory. But you know, Kylo Ren came to be, and he was extremely powerful in the dark side. and then now we have, and then we had Snoke, who corrupted him, brought him over, and then Luke cut himself off from the Force. So then now we had Rey, who was already, who had the Force in her initially, but it really wasn't that strong. But now with Luke cut off from the Force, she did become more powerful, and she just matched the power that Kylo Ren had. And oh, that brings me to the end of the movie, because we see one of the children from Canto Bight, and he goes to grab a broom to sweep up the stables that he's in, and uses the Force to pull it towards him, symbolizing that the Force is and always will be in motion, trying to balance the universe. What a great way to end the film. I mean, I didn't like the kids acting. I don't think that they'll focus anything on specifically him. I think that he was mainly a placeholder to show the symbolism that, you know, the Force will always keep working, and it will always work towards a balance, and that Force users are being born every single day in different corners of the galaxy. And I actually, this was one other thing. I did notice, and actually, I've only got 2 more things to talk about, and then I'm gonna end it right here. But I did notice on the second viewing that there was part of the story played with a standard cliche. You know, how a film would have this hero who tells everybody, you know, something's about to happen, and that the leader is doing something wrong, but, you know, the main hero is right about everything, and the hero, who we are all rooting for, has to overcome the obstacle and prove to everybody that he's right, and then everybody has a revelation that the hero was right all along, and then they actually fix things, and then, you know, conclusion and shit. But The Last Jedi doesn't do that. Instead, we get Poe, who doesn't understand why Holdo seems to be running away from the fight, which we already know she was doing that to get everybody away, and then she would distract them, let the lifeboats go down to the planet of Crate, and they would actually be able to contact any allies while being protected by that giant metallic gate of theirs. But yeah, he doesn't understand why Holdo seems to be running away from the fight, and naturally I would have actually thought that she would share the true plan with Poe, because he is a higher ranking person, he's a leader. But then I remembered, Leia demoted him for the shit that he pulled in the first half of the film, because he went out and destroyed a dreadnought, or him and his team went out to destroy a dreadnought cruiser, even though Leia specifically said come back to base. And you know what? It got pretty much all of their bombers and every person in their bomber squadron killed and destroyed. So yeah, she only knows him as his reputation for being a really, really reckless wildcard, as well as the fact that Leia demoted him. I wouldn't trust a stranger like him with that kind of reputation if I didn't know him, if he was pretty much mostly a stranger. Okay, we're almost done. First off, I want to talk about the porgs for just a second. They are awesome. I was worried that if they had no narrative use, which they don't, then they would be overly useless. But nope, they were used just right. They are fucking adorable and funny, so funny. I still think that their best scene in the entire movie is when Chewbacca is getting ready to eat a cooked porg, and then all those porgs are watching him. They're kind of confused, but also kind of scared, and he roars at them, and then they fly off, you know, in fright. But then to make matters worse, he starts getting ready to actually eat it again, and he tries to take another bite, and notices a porg watching him while crying, because that porg is aware of what's going on. And I love that Chewie, and this actually kind of broke my heart, but also made me happy. I love that Chewie is so affected by the look on the creature's face that he doesn't even try to eat it after all. Oh my god, that one was, oh, that was actually great. I actually think that, I think that's it, yeah. Shit. I actually should have, I should have finished with more show notes. I should have taken a little bit more time to make sure, and just really, it's whatever, done is done. Thank you guys so much for watching, and actually, if you'd like to discuss the film more with me specifically, just go into the description down below and look for the link to the channel's Facebook page. through there, just send a message, and I'll try to get back as quickly as possible, because I would really love to talk about the movie with anybody, as well as discussing anything that I left out in this review, because I hate when I miss something, because knowing me, I forgot something. I definitely forgot something. Anyway, that's all the time that I have for today. Thanks once again. Please subscribe if you haven't already for more reviews and content, and farewell until the next video.